Okay, so welcome back. Today we'll be beginning on page 133 with the urinary system. Excuse me. The urinary system is primarily responsible for forming and excreting urine. However, in doing so, it also performs many regulatory functions, and we'll go into those regulatory functions and under the functions of the urinary system. So there are nitrogen-based waste produced during cellular metabolism that are only eliminated with the passive transport mechanism of filtration. Many of the harmful wastes are actively transported from the blood to become part of the urine. Grit and phosphate mechanism for creating ATP, the adenotriphosphate, in muscles generates some of the waste that are removed by the kidneys, demonstrating the interdependence between the muscular system, the circulatory system, and the urinary system. So we'll begin with the structures of the urinary system. The structures include the kidneys, the ureters, the urinary bladder, and the urethra. We'll begin discussing the kidneys. These are located against the posterior wall of the abdominal cavity. They lie on either side of the spine, and they're at the level of the superior lumbar vertebra. Each kidney is shaped like a kidney bean, and it measures 5 inches long, about 2.5 inches wide, and approximately 1 inch thick. The kidneys are suspended in abdominal cavity by a fatty mass called the adipose capsule, and a renal fascia, and are not well protected by the bones. The 12th rib is pretty much right on top of the kidneys, but then other than that, they're pretty well exposed. The ureters are up next. These are the tubes that run from the kidney down to the bladder. They're typically about 12 inches long and about 1/4 of an inch in diameter. They carry urine away from the kidneys. Then the urinary bladder. This is the storage site for urine. It's located just behind the pubic symphysis, so that bone in your lower abdomen. Your bladder is just behind it. Typically, the bladder is normally about 2 inches long, but when it's full, it can distend to a size of about 5 inches. Then finally, we have the urethra. The urethra runs from the urinary bladder to the outside of the body. It is used to carry the urine for elimination, called urination. It's an involuntary smooth, or it has an involuntary smooth muscle sphincter at the exit of the urinary bladder, and this sphincter closes when the urine is being stored. And then there's also a voluntary muscle sphincter further down the urethra that you can control. So when we contract the skeletal muscle sphincter, the urine flow is stopped. And when we relax the sphincter, the urine is excreted through the urethra to the external environment. So this is a diagram of the urinary system. Of course, you have the kidneys sitting here below the diaphragm. On top of the kidneys, these little hat-like objects, these are adrenal glands. Then you have your ureter, the 12-inch tube running from the kidney to the bladder. This is your bladder, prostate gland if you're male. And then the urethra runs from the bladder to the external portion of your body. There's a couple of videos now for you to watch on the urinary system. And then when you're finished with that, you can come back and we will discuss the functions of the urinary system more in depth. Okay, so the functions of the urinary system. The structures of the urinary system accomplish several tasks. They filter blood to remove chemical waste and excrete the waste in the form of urine. The system regulates the volume of blood, the pH of body fluids, and the red blood cell formation in the red bone marrow. The kidneys also control blood volume and therefore blood pressure by controlling how much water is lost in the urine. But first up, we're going to discuss urine formation. So the urinary system goes through a series of steps to eliminate chemical waste in the form of urine. First, the passive transport mechanism of filtration occurs in the capillaries that serve the kidneys. So the blood traveling through the kidneys is under high pressure that forces the water and dissolved substances through the capillary walls. Second, the filtrate, or those substances that are filtered through, or the solution that comes through the membrane, undergoes a process called reabsorption. All the dissolved material is not waste, so the body reabsorbs the substances that are useful, such as the amino acids to build proteins, ions to use in cellular functions, glucose for the process of creating ATP, or energy, and water to keep cells and tissues hydrated. The rest of the substances are then disposed of. Most of the substances must be actively or passively transported out of the kidney and back into the blood capillaries. But water occurs through the process of osmosis. And remember, we talked about with cells and tissues, we talked about the process of osmosis. The third step of urine formation is secretion, which is how some additional ions, creatine, and many drugs, such as penicillin, are removed from the body. Second function of the urinary system we have is excretion. So once the urine has been produced, it's excreted from the body by the other structures of the urinary system. The urine travels from the kidneys through the ureters down into the urinary bladder. The urine is stored in the bladder temporarily and is carried to the external environment through the ureters. Then we have regulation. We said that the main functions was transportation and regulation. So the regulation portion of that process of making urine, the complex structure and functions of the kidneys also regulate the blood volume, the chemical content of the blood, the pH of body fluids, and red blood cell formation. The blood volume occurs when the reabsorption activity of the kidneys moves the water from the kidney back to the blood capillaries through the process of osmosis. The amount of water reabsorbed in the kidneys is a homeostatic mechanism that keeps the blood volume stable after water is lost through the skin in the process of perspiration, out through the lungs, the water vapor, or out through the digestive tract as in the elimination of feces. The kidneys work at keeping blood volume constant despite the widely changing patterns in the fluid intake. Then regulation as far as the chemicals are involved. Once the blood has been filtered in the kidneys, the filtrate contains ions and other molecules that are necessary for cellular metabolism. Regulating the reabsorption of these substances is another homeostatic mechanism. Then we have the pH balance portion of regulation. As we mentioned in cardiovascular system, the normal pH of the blood is 7.4. The body constantly creates byproducts of cellular metabolism that affects the pH levels, but the homeostatic mechanisms maintain a stable pH in the body. The kidneys are the primary structure for regulating the pH, although the respiratory activity also has changes in the pH levels. Red blood cell formation. So the kidneys are the primary structures that secrete the erythropoietin, which is a hormone that stimulates the production of red blood cells, and it does so within that red marrow of the bones. So next up is the effects of massage on the urinary system. So the mechanical effects of massage result in more cellular and chemical waste to be excreted through the urine. And massage also encourages smooth muscle contraction of the urinary bladder to eliminate more urine. So with this, that's the end of our section on the urinary system. Again, make sure you turn in your diagram or your chart of the urinary system, including the structures involved in the urinary system, the functions of the urinary system, and the effects of massage on the urinary system. Also, be sure you take your quiz, and if you need to continue watching videos, you can rewatch those videos that's provided. We'll move on with the endocrine system for the next lesson.